USS Arizona. The USS Arizona was a Pennsylvania-class battleship commissioned in 1916 and one of the strongest ships in the U.S. Navy during its time. Armed with 12 14-inch guns and a crew of over 1,500, it was considered a symbol of American naval power in the Pacific. Stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, the Arizona was part of the Pacific Fleet when, on December 7, 1941, it became the victim of a surprise attack by the Imperial Japanese Navy. That fateful day began like any other. But by 7:55 a.m., the calm of a Sunday morning was destroyed as Japanese bombers landed upon Pearl Harbor. Arizona's crew rushed to battle stations as the first wave of attacks began. Torpedo bombers launched their strikes and the Arizona came under fire. At 8:06 a.m., a bomb hit the ship's forward section near Turret 2. This was the start of the ship's destruction. The bomb likely tore through the ship's armored deck and detonated in the forward magazine, starting a chain reaction. The explosion was so intense that it tore Arizona apart and triggered fires on nearby ships. The forward part of the ship, including its turrets and mast, collapsed into the wreckage. The blast went on for 2 days and claimed the lives of 1,177 of Arizona's 1,512 crew members, nearly half of the total casualties from the entire attack on Pearl Harbor. USS Oklahoma, 1941. The USS Oklahoma, a battleship commissioned on May 2, 1916, was a proud stalwart of the Pacific Fleet. It served during World War I and continued its duty in the years leading up to World War II, making its way into the Pacific Fleet by 1936. Stationed at Pearl Harbor by December 1941, Oklahoma was positioned alongside other battleships on Battleship Row, a prime target for the Japanese forces that launched their surprise attack that morning. On December 7, 1941 at 7:56 a.m., the Oklahoma was struck by as many as 9 torpedoes in rapid succession. The first hit caused an explosion that flooded the forward sections of the ship, knocking out power and making the ship unsteady. Another torpedo hit near the ship's engine rooms, further compromising its stability. Within just 12 minutes of the first strike, the Oklahoma capsized, rolling over and trapping hundreds of men below deck. As the ship turned upside down, water poured into the ship's lower decks, leaving sailors fighting for their lives in pitch-dark compartments. The immediate rescue efforts began almost as soon as the ship capsized. Over the next 2 days, 32 men were rescued from the wreckage, many of them alive, but the damage to Oklahoma was tragic. After the attack, the Navy was able to conduct recovery operations, but the battleship's structural damage was too severe to repair. By 1943, engineers had succeeded in righting the Oklahoma, but the ship was beyond return to service. In September 1944, the Oklahoma was decommissioned, and it was sold for scrap. However, fate had another tragic chapter in store. On May 17, 1947, as Oklahoma was being towed to the west coast to be dismantled, the ship sank in a storm off the coast of Alaska, permanently lost to the deep. Yamato, 1945. On April 7, 1945, the Japanese super battleship Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, went on a mission that was as doomed as it was desperate. The mission, called Operation Tenichigo, or Heaven No. 1, was a last-ditch attempt by the Japanese Imperial Navy to stop the U.S. invasion of Okinawa. It was a suicide mission from the start, with Yamato, along with a light cruiser and 8 destroyers, tasked with attacking the U.S. fleet in a bid to inflict as much damage as possible before getting destroyed. Armed with 9 18.1-inch guns, its primary weapons could launch a 3,200-pound shell over 22 miles. This ship was nearly invincible, but by 1945, Japan's naval power was all but destroyed, and the Yamato was left with limited air cover and no real support to counter U.S. forces. The plan was for the fleet to sail to Okinawa, sinking as many U.S. troop transports as possible before beached, continuing to fight until the last man. On the morning of April 7th, Yamato was spotted by American reconnaissance planes, and the U.S. Navy quickly launched an aerial assault. At approximately noon, the first wave of attacks began. Aircraft from the U.S. Carrier Task Force, including dive bombers and torpedo bombers, began their assault on the battleship. The Yamato fought back, but its defensive capabilities were no match for the scale of the American assault. The Yamato took hit after hit. Torpedoes struck the ship's sides, flooding its lower decks, and bombs exploded above, causing massive fires and further damage. As the damage mounted, the ship began to list, and her fate was sealed. Despite efforts to stay afloat and counter the damage, the Yamato was doomed. At around 2 p.m., the Yamato's crew was ordered to abandon ship, but many of the crew members were trapped below deck, unable to escape. Just before 3 p.m., after taking over 30 bomb and torpedo hits, the ship sank. The exact number of casualties is difficult to determine, but it's estimated that between 2,400 and 3,000 of the 3,300 crew members died with the ship. Bismarck 1941. On May 19, 1941, the mighty Bismarck, the largest battleship of its time, set sail on its maiden voyage. This was the beginning of a mission so daring that it would amaze the world for years to come. The Bismarck, accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, was part of a top-secret operation codenamed Operation Rheinübung. Their goal? To sever the vital lifeline between Great Britain and the United States by attacking Allied convoys across the North Atlantic, which carried essential supplies like oil and food. The Nazis believed their unsinkable battleship would force Britain into submission by cutting off these vital resources. The British quickly became aware of the Bismarck's movements and dispatched a fleet to hunt it down. Among them were newly commissioned battleships HMS Prince of Wales and the legendary HMS Hood. On May 24th, the two British ships confronted the Bismarck in the Denmark Strait, situated between Greenland and Iceland. The Hood, despite its reputation, fired the first shots, but its shells missed their target. As the battle grew, the Bismarck returned fire, and within minutes, a shell from the German battleship struck Hood's ammunition magazine. This caused a huge explosion, and the Hood sank almost immediately, taking 1,418 of its crew with it. Only 3 men survived. Though victorious in this initial engagement, the Bismarck was not without damage. It had suffered significant hits and was leaking oil, which forced Admiral Gunther Lütjen, the commander of the German fleet, to abandon the chase of the Prince of Wales. Instead, he ordered a return to port in Nazi-occupied France. Meanwhile, British Admiral John Tovey, determined to avenge the loss of Hood, sent every available ship from the British home fleet to track down the Bismarck before it could reach the safety of German-occupied ports. On May 26, the British launched an attack from the HMS Ark Royal, an aircraft carrier. Despite poor weather conditions, British Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers successfully located the Bismarck and launched a series of torpedo strikes. The bombers' slow, outdated planes were an easy target for the Bismarck's anti-aircraft guns, but their torpedoes hit the battleship's rudders. This disabled the ship's ability to steer, leaving it helpless as it circled aimlessly in the vast Atlantic. After Bismarck was declared defenseless, the British warships closed in, and by the morning of May 27th, they let out a final barrage of artillery. For over an hour, the Bismarck was pounded by British fire. At around 10:40 a.m., a combination of the British salvo and a deliberate scuttling order from the Germans led to the Bismarck sinking. In the end, only 110 of the 2,100 crew members survived. The once feared battleship was lost less than 10 days after it had first set sail. HMS Hood, 1941. On May 24, 1941, during the Battle of the Denmark Strait, Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, was engaged by the German battleship Bismarck and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen. What followed was a quick and tragic end for the British battlecruiser. The battle started as Hood, accompanied by the battleship Prince of Wales, intercepted the German squadron. Despite Admiral Holland's intent to minimize Hood's vulnerability to plunging fire, his decision to maintain a direct course compromised the ability of the British ships to bring all their guns to bear. At approximately 5:55 a.m., Bismarck opened fire on Hood. Initially, the British targeted the wrong ship, focusing on Prinz Eugen, allowing Bismarck the opportunity to zero in. Meanwhile, Prinz Eugen's high explosive shells caused a fire on Hood's deck near the anti-aircraft ammunition lockers. This blaze further exposed Hood to disaster. At 6 a.m., Bismarck fired a salvo that sealed Hood's fate. One of the German shells struck near Hood's aft magazines. Eyewitnesses described a flash, followed by a massive explosion that ripped the ship apart. The aft section disintegrated instantly, and Hood broke in two. Within 3 minutes, the forward section was submerged, dragging 1,415 crewmen to their deaths. Only 3 sailors survived the sinking. The loss of Hood shocked the British public and spurred an intense hunt for Bismarck. Within days, the Royal Navy avenged Hood by sinking Bismarck. Despite this, Hood's demise became a story of the vulnerabilities that come with aging battlecruiser designs when faced with modern battleship firepower. Turpets, 1944. The destruction of the German battleship Turpets, once titled the pride of Hitler's Navy, was one of the longest and most persistent military operations of World War II. Dubbed the Beast by Winston Churchill, the Turpets was a 52,000-ton heavily armored ship with 15-inch guns that could hit targets 22 miles away and achieve speeds of 34 knots. Her presence in the Atlantic and Arctic posed a strong threat to Allied convoys, forcing the Allies to commit enormous rescues to her elimination during many years. In 1943, the Turpets was anchored in Kåfjord, a remote and well-fortified fjord in northern Norway. Attempts to destroy her became increasingly strong. British midget submarines in Operation Source managed to damage her significantly by planting explosive charges beneath the hull. However, she was not fully disabled. On the 12th of November 1944, the RAF launched its decisive strike. 30 Lancasters suffered icy conditions, but took off from Scotland. They reached Tromsø under a clear sky. 2 direct hits and 1 near miss, which were delivered by tallboys, caused major damage. 1 bomb tore through the armored deck, lighting ammunition stores and splitting the vessel in 2. The Turpets capsized, trapping over 1,000 crew members inside her hull. The sinking of the Turpets marked the end of a 4-year campaign. For the Allies, her destruction eliminated a major threat to Arctic convoys and freed resources for other operations. Churchill's Beast had finally been slain, making the Turpets a signature of the effort required to neutralize Nazi Germany's strongest naval weapon. Matsu, 1943. The Matsu was a Japanese battleship of the Nagato class, commissioned in 1921 and named after the Matsu province. At the time of its construction, it was one of the most advanced battleships in the world, boasting a length of 224.94 meters, a displacement of over 39,000 tons, and a speed of 26 knots. It was armed with 8 16-inch guns, a feature that gave it strong firepower and made it a symbol of Japan's rising naval ability. The Matsu had relatively uneventful combat history, missing out on key early World War II operations like the attack on Pearl Harbor. It served primarily in training roles and fleet stunts. However, the ship's fate took a tragic turn on June 8, 1943. While anchored in Hiroshima Bay, an enormous explosion erupted in the No. 3 turret, splitting the battleship in 2. The forward section sank almost instantly, while the aft section floated shortly before succumbing to the waves several hours later. The explosion was deafening, claiming the lives of 1,121 of the 1,474 on board, including sailors, trainees, and civilians, making it one of the deadliest peacetime naval disasters in history. The exact cause of the explosion remains unknown. Initial Japanese investigations suggested sabotage. Other theories proposed that the explosion resulted from an accidental fire in the ammunition magazine, potentially caused by poor handling of volatile cordite or a spark generated during maintenance. Musashi, 1944. The Musashi was no ordinary battleship. It was a floating empire of Japan's naval supremacy and wartime ambition. Commissioned in August 1942, this sister ship to the legendary Yamato was a masterpiece of engineering constructed in Nagasaki. Stretching around 862 feet and displacing nearly 73,000 tons, the Musashi was armed with the largest naval guns ever built, 9 gigantic 18.1-inch cannons capable of hurling shells over 26 miles. With a crew of 2,500 and reinforced by layers of armor thought to be impenetrable, it was designed to dominate the seas and protect the Empire's ambitions in the Pacific. Its final voyage in October 1944 was designed to be legendary. As part of the Japanese center force during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Musashi sailed into the Sibuyan Sea, aiming to crush the Allied invasion at Leyte. But it was there, under the force of U.S. carrier planes, that it might begin to fall. 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs tore through its armor, destroying the massive battleship. For hours, the crew fought desperately to keep it afloat, but as the waters of the Sibuyan Sea swallowed the ship, it became clear that no amount of courage or skill could save it. By late afternoon on October 24, 1944, the once mighty Musashi began to sink heavily to one side. It sank in the deep waters, taking with it over 1,000 lives. HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, 1941. On December 10, 1941, the British naval force known as Force C, containing the HMS Prince of Wales, a King George V-class battleship, and the HMS Repulse, a battlecruiser, was sent to intercept the advancing Japanese invasion fleet near Malaya, just 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The task force had been ordered to prevent the Japanese from completing their land invasion, but the British fleet faced a difficulty: a lack of air cover. The British ships were alone, with no aircraft carriers or supporting planes, which would soon prove tragic. In the early morning hours, the Japanese had already launched their offensive, sending bombers and torpedo bombers from their air bases in French Indochina to target the British fleet. The first wave, consisting of 12 torpedo bombers from the 22nd Air Flotilla, attacked HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse around 11 a.m. Despite the fact that the British ship's radar system had detected the incoming aircraft, there was little they could do to defend against the well-coordinated attack. The Prince of Wales was the first target. The Japanese torpedo bombers launched their assault, hitting the ship with multiple torpedoes. The Prince of Wales was severely damaged as the torpedoes caused massive flooding, tearing her propulsion system. Although the ship's crew fought to maintain power and keep her afloat, the Prince of Wales was declared nearly immobile. The crew tried to continue firing at the incoming planes, but the situation quickly became impossible. Meanwhile, the Repulse, though moving at a faster speed, was also under attack by a second wave of torpedo bombers. The Repulse was hit by multiple torpedoes, which caused a lot of damage. The first torpedo struck her starboard side, flooding several compartments and causing a major list to port. Despite efforts to control the flooding, further torpedo hits ensured that the battlecruiser would not survive. The Repulse was sinking rapidly, and at 12:33 p.m., she went down, taking with her more than 500 of her crew. While these attacks were occurring, the remaining destroyers in the force attempted to provide some defense and rescue efforts. However, the air superiority of the Japanese proved overwhelming. The Prince of Wales managed to stay afloat for a little longer despite her severe damage, but the continuous attacks from Japanese bombers and torpedo bombers eventually led to her sinking at 3:18 p.m., just 48 minutes after the Repulse had gone down. Charhost, 1943. The German battleship Charhost was sunk on December 26, 1943 during the Battle of the North Cape, in the freezing Arctic waters near northern Norway. Built back in the 1930s, Charhost was fast and well-armed. Earlier in the war, she had gained a reputation for attacking Allied supply convoys. This time, she was sent on a mission called Operation Ostfront to attack convoy JW-55B, which was carrying supplies to the Soviet Union. But the Germans didn't know that British intelligence had already cracked their plans. The Royal Navy had set up a trap, with a powerful force led by Admiral Bruce Fraser on the battleship HMS Duke of York. Charhost left the port of Altenfjord with 5 destroyers, but the weather was so rough that the destroyers had to turn back. That left Charhost sailing alone. The British cruisers, including HMS Belfast, struck first. They knocked out her radar, which basically left her blind in the middle of snow, darkness, and chaos. Charhost tried to escape, but it didn't work. HMS Duke of York hit her hard, damaging her engines. Then British destroyers closed in and launched several torpedoes. By the evening, the ship was too badly damaged to stay afloat. She went down with almost 2,000 crew members. Only 36 survived. The British also lost 21 sailors, and 11 were wounded. Charhost's sinking was a huge win for the Allies. It removed the last big surface threat to the Arctic convoys and showed how important radar and teamwork had become in modern naval battles. In September 2000, a team from the BBC, NRK, and the Royal Norwegian Navy found the wreck at the bottom of the Barents Sea. The ship was lying upside down, and her bow had been blown off probably from a massive explosion inside the ship. Investigators later confirmed that once her radar was gone, Charhost never really stood a chance. Fusso, 1944. During World War II, Japan suffered one of its most tragic naval losses at the Battle of Surigao Strait on October 25, 1944. This battle was part of the much larger and more intense Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. The battleship Fusso, launched in 1914, played a major role in this fight. She was one of the first battleships that was fully designed and built in Japan. By the 1930s, Fusso had gone through several upgrades, but even with the improvements, her armor and layout were outdated compared to newer warships. Under the command of Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura, Fusso sailed into battle as part of the Japanese Southern Force. Their mission was to stop American forces from landing on Leyte Island, but the U.S. Navy was already prepared. Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf had his ships positioned right across the narrow strait, creating a deadly trap. As the Japanese fleet moved in, they were first attacked by American PT boats. Then, U.S. destroyers launched waves of torpedoes. Fusso was hit hard by one of them, fired from the USS Melvin. The damage was serious. The ship slowed down, lost its ability to communicate, and started leaning to one side. It eventually fell behind the rest of the fleet. Despite the crew's efforts, the battleship couldn't recover and sank not long after. Out of more than 1,600 sailors on board, only 10 survived. For years, there was confusion about what exactly happened. Some believe Fusso had broken in two before sinking, but in 2017, a research team aboard the vessel Avis Petrel found the wreck deep under the sea. It was upside down but mostly in one piece. The front of the ship had folded backward along the hull, but it was still clearly attached. HMS Victoria, 1893. The HMS Victoria disaster took place on June 22, 1893, during a British naval exercise off the coast of Tripoli, which is now part of Lebanon. Launched in 1887, the Victoria was the flagship of the Mediterranean Fleet, armed with two massive 16.25-inch guns and a forward turret. While she had impressive firepower, the ship also had serious design flaws, one of which was reduced stability. During the exercise, Vice Admiral Sir George Tryon ordered two columns of ships to turn inward at the same time to change direction. The spacing between the columns was just 1,200 yards, way too close for both ships to turn safely, as each needed almost that much space. Some officers raised concerns, but Trine insisted they go ahead anyway. The result was disastrous. The HMS Camperdown collided with Victoria, tearing open her starboard side below the waterline. Water flooded in quickly, worsened by the open portholes and hatches left open because of the summer heat. Just 15 minutes after the impact, the Victoria capsized and sank, taking 358 men with her, including Admiral Tryon. Reports say that before going down with the ship, Tryon acknowledged his mistake. In 2004, divers Christian Francis and Mark Elliott discovered the wreck at a depth of about 460 feet. They found it standing almost upright on its bow, with the stern facing the surface. Experts believe the ship's weight distribution and still-moving propellers caused it to settle in this unusual position. Investigations later confirmed that Tryon's poor judgment and his refusal to listen to warnings were the main causes of the tragedy. His officers were later cleared of any blame. Dunkerk, 1940. The French battleship Dunkerk was launched in 1935 and was quite ahead of its time. She was built specifically to take on the German Deutschland-class cruisers and became the first of her class. What made Dunkerque stand out was her unusual design. All of her main guns were placed at the front in two large turrets. This setup made it easier to focus firepower straight ahead. But sadly, Dunkerque met her end on July 3, 1940 during a British attack on the French fleet at Mers el-Kébir, a port in Algeria. Just a few weeks earlier, France had signed an armistice with Germany, and Britain was worried that the powerful French Navy might end up in German hands. To stop that from happening, the British launched Operation Catapult, a mission to take control of or destroy French ships. At Mers el-Kébir, the battleship Dunkerque was docked with its back to the sea, which made it hard for the ship to move or defend itself properly. The British tried to negotiate first, but when that failed, they opened fire. Dunkerque was hit several times. One shell slammed into a main gun turret, causing an explosion inside and killing crew members. Another damaged the rudder, while a third one tore through internal sections of the ship, setting off ammunition and damaging key machinery. A fourth shell exploded in the boiler room, knocking out the ship's power. To stop Dunkerque from sinking, the crew managed to beach her near the shore. The British thought the ship might still be usable, so they launched a second attack on July 6th. This time, torpedo bombers went after Dunkerque. The ship itself wasn't hit directly, but a nearby patrol boat named Terra Neuve was struck. Its depth charges exploded, sending shockwaves that caused more damage to Dunkerque's hull. Some compartments flooded, and parts of the ship's structure were bent out of shape. Even with all this damage, the French were able to refloat and repair her over the next few months. In November 1942, things took another turn. As German forces moved in to seize the French fleet at Toulon, Dunkerque's crew scuttled the ship to keep it from falling into enemy hands. Later on, the ship was partially dismantled by Italian and German forces. After the war ended, the wreck stayed in Toulon until it was officially removed from the Navy list in 1955 and scrapped in 1958. JPN Congo, 1944. Congo was Japan's first modern battlecruiser, built in Britain in 1913 and later upgraded into a fast battleship in the 1930s. Known for her speed and firepower, she served in key Pacific battles before meeting a tragic end on November 21, 1944, during World War II. On that day, she was on her way back to Japan from Brunei, along with two destroyers, Hamikaze and Isakaze, when an American submarine, the USS Sealion II, spotted them in the Taiwan Strait. The submarine slowly got into position and fired 6 torpedoes. 3 of them hit Congo on the left side, near the boiler rooms. The damage was serious. 2 boiler rooms flooded right away, which slowed the ship down a lot and made it tilt to one side. Still, the crew tried to keep her going and worked hard to stop the flooding. But as more water came in and the damage spread, it became clear they were losing the fight. Then, without warning, a huge explosion ripped through the front part of the ship. It's believed one of the main magazines, where ammunition is stored, blew up, likely because of fires or seawater reacting with unstable explosives. The blast tore Congo apart. She sank quickly off the coast of Taiwan, taking over 1,200 crew members with her, including Vice Admiral Yoshio Suzuki and Captain Yoshio Fujita. Only about 200 sailors survived. To this day, Congo's wreck has never been officially found. Based on survivor stories and U.S. Navy records, it's believed to be somewhere northwest of Taiwan, around 350 feet underwater, but no one has confirmed the exact location yet. Congo holds a sad record. She's the only battleship in history that was ever sunk by a submarine while moving at sea. HMS Baram, 1941. HMS Baram was a massive battleship of the British Royal Navy, launched during World War I and known for her power and size. She measured about 643 feet long, weighed over 34,000 tons when fully loaded, and carried 8 15-inch guns. Her Her thick armor and powerful weapons made her one of the most important ships in the fleet. Baram served in several major battles and, by 1941, was playing a key role in the Mediterranean Sea supporting Allied forces in North Africa. On November 25, 1941, Baram was part of a group of ships near the coast of Egypt. Their mission was to stop enemy supply convoys heading to support German and Italian troops. While patrolling the waters off Sidi Barrani, the group was attacked by a German submarine, U-331. The submarine managed to sneak past the escorts and launched 4 torpedoes at Baram. 3 of them hit the left side of the ship. At first, the ship seemed stable, but within minutes, a huge explosion tore through her. The blast was so powerful that it lifted the ship out of the water, breaking it apart before it sank completely. Out of the roughly 1,200 crew members on board, 862 died, including the ship's captain, Geoffrey Cook. One of the survivors was Vice Admiral Henry Pridham Whipple. A film crew on a nearby ship captured the terrifying explosion, making it one of the few battleship sinkings ever caught on camera. An investigation later found that the torpedoes caused a fire near the smaller ammunition storage, which set off a chain reaction and exploded the ship's main gun magazines. To avoid giving the enemy an advantage and to keep morale high, British officials kept the sinking a secret for several weeks before informing the public in January 1942. Shinano, 1944. The Japanese aircraft carrier Shinano had an unusual beginning. When construction started in 1940, she was supposed to be the 3rd ship in the Yamato-class battleships, some of the most powerful battleships ever built. But after Japan suffered huge losses at the Battle of Midway in 1942, the plan changed. Instead of becoming a battleship, Shinano was converted into an aircraft carrier. The idea was to turn her into a heavily armored support ship that could carry planes and supplies to other carriers and air bases. At over 67,000 tons, she was the biggest aircraft carrier ever built at that time, and to this day, she remains the largest warship ever sunk by a submarine. Shinano was officially commissioned into the Navy on November 19, 1944. Just 10 days later, she set out on her first voyage, even though she wasn't fully finished and hadn't done proper sea trials. She left Yokosuka, heading for Kure, with 3 destroyers escorting her. What the Japanese didn't know was that the American submarine USS Archerfish was lurking nearby. In the early hours of November 29th, Archerfish fired 6 torpedoes. 4 of them hit Shinano on her starboard right side. At first, the crew thought the damage could be handled, but there were a lot of problems. The ship's watertight compartments weren't properly sealed, many of the safety systems weren't working yet, and the crew didn't have enough training to deal with an emergency like this. Water kept rushing in, and the ship started to lean badly. They tried to balance the flooding by pumping water into other areas, but it didn't help. After several hours, the massive ship rolled over and sank about 65 miles off Japan's coast. More than 1,400 people lost their lives. After the war, U.S. experts looked into what went wrong. They found major design flaws and poor construction. One big issue was how the ship's armor belt connected to the torpedo protection system. It was so badly designed that the torpedoes caused massive internal damage. On top of that, no one had tested how watertight the ship actually was before sending her out to sea. All of these problems, along with an unprepared crew, led to the tragic sinking of a ship that was meant to show Japan's naval strength. To this day, the wreck of Shinano has never been found. It's believed to be lying about 13,100 feet deep in the northern part of the Ryukyu Trench. HMS Belfast, 1942. HMS Belfast was a light cruiser built for the Royal Navy. She was launched on March 17, 1938 in Belfast by Anne Chamberlain, the wife of the then Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. The ship was built by Harland and Wolff and was meant to protect trade routes and take part in offensive missions. She officially joined the Navy just before World War II began and was first used to help enforce a blockade against Germany. But not long after entering service, on November 21, 1939, Belfast hit a German magnetic mine while heading out for a training exercise. The explosion caused serious damage. The keel bent, parts of the ship's machinery and decks were badly shaken, and one of the boiler rooms was completely wrecked. About 20 crew members were injured, and sadly, one of them later died. The ship had to be towed back for repairs at Rosyth Dockyard. The damage was so bad that she was taken out of service in early January 1940. Over the next few years, Belfast went through major repairs and upgrades. Her armor was improved, the hull was reinforced, and advanced radar and fire control systems were added. These changes made her heavier, but also much stronger in battle. After nearly 3 years, she returned to service in November 1942. From there, Belfast took part in several key operations. She helped escort Arctic convoys carrying supplies to the Soviet Union and played a big role in the Battle of North Cape in December 1943, where she helped sink the German battlecruiser Charhost. In June 1944, Belfast also supported the D-Day landings, firing at enemy positions to help British and Canadian forces on the beaches. Today, HMS Belfast is a museum ship, permanently docked on the River Thames in London. USS Liberty, 1967. The USS Liberty started out as a cargo ship named SS Simmons Victory, built in 1945. Later, in 1964, it was turned into a spy ship for the US Navy working under the NSA. It was packed with high-tech equipment used to listen in on electronic communications like phone calls and radio signals. By 1967, during the rising tensions of the Six-Day War, Liberty was sent to the eastern Mediterranean to keep an eye on what was going on in the region. On June 8, 1967, while sailing in international waters near the Sinai Peninsula, the ship was suddenly attacked by Israeli forces. First, Israeli planes opened fire with machine guns and dropped napalm bombs. Then, torpedo boats arrived and launched 5 torpedoes, one of which hit the ship hard. The attack was devastating. 34 American crew members were killed and 171 were injured. Still, the crew did everything they could to keep the ship afloat, and eventually it was towed to Malta for emergency repairs. Later investigations claimed that the attack happened because the Israelis mistook Liberty for an Egyptian ship, but many of the survivors, and even some officials, didn't agree with that. They pointed out that Liberty was clearly marked and flying a large American flag. Both the US and Israel held their own inquiries. Israel later apologized and paid compensation to the families of those who died and to the US government. The damage to Liberty was too severe to fix. She was officially taken out of service in 1968 and later sold for scrap in 1973.